Welcome back, everyone. I know it has been a day, but I am just back from Nosferatu, so let's get straight into it and look at some footage.
Come to me.
So Nosferatu is a 2024 release written and directed by Robert Eggers, and it's a gothic tale of obsession between a young haunted woman and a terrifying vampire infatuated with her, causing untold horror in its wake. The film stars Lily-Rose Depp, Bill Skarsgard, Nicholas Hoult, Willem Dafoe, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Emma Corrin, and Ralph Ineson. Okay, so a bit of housekeeping before we really sink our teeth into this review. I'm a huge fan of Robert Eggers. I mean, I'm wearing a t-shirt of The Witch right now, and to bring it back to that, The Witch was a film I watched when it first released. I fell in love with that, and then subsequently with the works that came after that, like The Lighthouse and then The Northman. And the reason I bring this up is because when I fell in love with this director's work, it was very apparent that he wanted to make a remake of Nosferatu. Now, for those that don't know, the original Nosferatu released in 1922, over 100 years ago, by D.W. Murnau. It's a film I studied at university, a film which I suppose nowadays is tough to enjoy. You have to really care about this stuff to probably see any kind of merit in it, but it's a very impressive film, especially for the time, and it's a film I actually do quite enjoy. I love vampires, I love those stories, so way back when I first fell deeply in love with the work of Robert Eggers, and I heard he wanted to do a Nosferatu film, I was a little bit unsure, but also excited at the same time, because seeing him grow throughout the years and seeing the attention to detail that he takes and what a historian he is, and just how accurately he wants to portray the worlds he decides to put to screen, it just made me increasingly more excited to see what he'd do with a kind of redo of D.W. Murnau's work. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, you can take this as a completely unbiased review if you like. I always try to be as unbiased as possible, despite me having a big connection to the filmmaker over here, but I love this film. There, I said it, I have waited years for this. I get excited whenever a new Robert Eggers project comes around, and I was waiting for this one with bated breath, and I was not disappointed, but as usual, let's just get into it. To start with the man himself, Eggers, he wrote and directed this film, and obviously it's set in 1838 in the fictional town of Wisberg in Germany, and from the off, you are just so immersed in everything going on here. The attention to detail, which I spoke of, which this director is known for, is ever apparent in this one. From the costumes to the sets that they're in to the locations, it's astounding what the man does. I thought for something like The Northman, where he had a bigger budget and a bigger scale, he couldn't really do more, but I was obviously very wrong. And it's honestly just a breath of fresh air to see something this detailed from a director nowadays who's being backed by Universal along with Focus Features and has obviously got a budget behind him, and it's full of stars, and it's just great. But what I want to really focus on here when it comes to Eggers is the things he's doing behind the scenes, and especially the direction behind the camera. He teams up with his longtime cinematographer, Jaron Blaschke. They've shot everything together. He shot The Witch, he shot The Lighthouse, he shot The Northman, and now this, and they obviously have a very good and long-standing working relationship. And the two of them are absolutely cooking with gas here. This film was shot on 35mm film. I unfortunately didn't get to see it in that format because there's nowhere near me which actually screens those. But I saw it on the biggest screen I could possibly see, and just some of the images in this film are going to stay with me for a long time. And it's not just the images, it's what they're doing with light. There are scenes in this film where it's shot on color, but the way Eggers is using darkness and shadow, it almost becomes a black and white movie at times. And then another interesting evolution over here is Eggers has really developed the way he wants to move the camera. If you watch something like The Witch, it's all either very steady or very handheld and actually doesn't move around all that much. The Lighthouse is even more so. It's just kind of like slow pans here and there, very steady stuff. And then you got The Northman, where he was doing a bit more with tracking shots, where it was following the subject through environments and not cutting very often, these really impressive long takes, and they just doubled down in this one. There were genuinely points in this film where a take was so long and so well done and just moving from different framing to different framing, where then when it eventually cut, I kind of had to like reset and be like, whoa, okay, they just didn't cut the camera for a solid 3 minutes over there. And again, it just fills me with joy as someone who loves this guy's work and who backed him for a long time, to just see him ever growing and developing and pushing himself and the medium even further. Now, the one retraction I will make on all of this is obviously a remake of one of the most famous films of all time, at least for film nerds. And the retraction is that this film doesn't deviate pretty much at all from the original film. The original film is obviously a silent film because they didn't have the means or technology to put spoken dialogue into films back then, and that isn't the biggest difference here. Obviously, he does make some changes to the plot and the theme, but I would be lying if I said I didn't want him to go for a bit more emotionality in this, and I think he does kind of take a stab at it, but he only kind of dips his toes. He really just wanted to tell, I think, the most accurate telling of this story, which is, of course, based on Bram Stoker's Dracula. There's a whole ordeal over there where the estate tried to sue Nosferatu for even existing. We're actually very lucky that it does exist. That's the 1922 film, and now we have this one. But that's the only real retraction over here, and it's not a big one, because I think when you update something as old as the original Nosferatu and you do this with it and you really kind of go a bit balls to the wall with it, it's a good thing, it's a good update. New audiences are gonna find this. They might even go back and watch the original and contrast and compare. But yes, maybe I did want something a little bit more. Where I was satisfied is where he really honed in on the psychosexual element of this story. And he kind of exploits it a little bit to almost like an incredible degree at times. And as someone who's a little bit of a freak inside and loves this stuff for some reason, it really did like warm a part of my strange little heart. But as we move on from that, we have to talk about the cast in this film, because it is stacked, to be completely honest, and everyone is at pretty much the top of their game. I'll start with the people that he's worked with before. So Willem Dafoe, he worked with him in The Northman and for the first time in The Lighthouse, and apparently he wants to work with him more going forward, which is just music to my ears, to be completely honest. And Dafoe is fantastic here. He plays Dr. von Franz. He's this Swiss doctor who was one of the great physicians, but then got involved in the occult and he was kicked out of his university. And it's the kind of typical Willem Dafoe wackiness that we're used to, but also very subdued, because he's almost the voice of reason in this story when Count Orlok's evil has come to Visberg. Another collaborator of his and one of my favorite actors ever is Ralph Ineson, who he first worked with him in The Witch, and he's back over here. He plays Dr. Willem Sievers. He's tasked with treating Ellen Hutter as she goes through these, I guess, possessions. And this guy can do no wrong. Everything I see him in, he's great. He's got the best voice in the world and just such a presence, and it's just really felt over here, I think. Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Emma Corrin play the Hardings. They take Ellen in when Thomas has to go off to Transylvania, and they're both really, really good here. I'm actually fans of both of them. Corrin is fairly new to the scene for me. Aaron Taylor-Johnson I've been watching for years, and I've always been a fan when he gets good material. He doesn't always have the best taste, I don't think. But when he gets a good role, he's someone who can really transform, and I really bought into him over here as Friedrich Harding, and he was great. And Emma Corrin has actually a really standout scene in the film, and I'm very excited to see what's more to come with her. One ever so slightly weak link over here is Nicholas Hoult. Now, big fan, and he has a big weight to carry with being Thomas Hutter in this, but he's good, but I feel like there is just something slightly missing, and that might be due to the lack of emotionality in this film that I think we really needed to transcend to that next level. But other than that, he's frankly great. Now, I saved these two for last because they're the two big ones. If anyone has been following any of the press to do with this film, you're gonna hear these two people being spoken about, and that is Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok and Lily-Rose Depp as Ellen Hutter. Now, we start with Skarsgård. He is no stranger to having a load of makeup thrown on him and being completely unrecognizable and having to really, I guess, act out of his skin. If we go back to his character of Pennywise, he was definitely the best thing about those It movies, but I could sort of see a little bit of him in those. And in this film, and I don't think it's just because of the incredibly impressive makeup over here, he is completely unrecognizable in the role of Count Orlok, and it is all for the better. He did an interview in the press run for this film where he said he learned how to lower his voice by an octave, and it actually risked damaging his voice. I don't know how true that is, but when you hear Count Orlok's voice for the first time, I kind of like white-knuckled on my seat, and I was just like, oh my god. And as I mentioned, he is always in this incredible makeup, which makes him look really menacing and unsettling. But there's something about his eyes. There are times where the camera goes right close up to them, and the anger and emotion he's able to portray in just a stare is just out of this world. And then we come to Lily-Rose Depp. Now, the work I'm most familiar with of Lily-Rose Depp is unfortunately of The Idol, which is a bizarre TV series where I actually think she's very committed and she's very good. Just the whole story of that and its direction is just weird. This role was originally going to be played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Both her and Eggers wanted to make this film after The Witch, but I guess due to some kind of conflict, she could no longer take it, and it came down to Lily-Rose Depp. And there's a lot that's been said in the press about her and the kind of like studies she did into these visceral reactions people can have, whether it's from psychosis or from possession. She even cited the film Possession as one of her inspirations for this, and quite frankly, she is out of this world. There are parts where I guess in the kind of like little dialogue exchanges where it could be a little bit hokey, but I think that's part of just like the writing. But in everything else, and especially in the scenes where she is being controlled by Orlok, or she is dreaming about him, or he's infiltrating her in some way, I did not know that the human body could do these things without the help of visual effects. And I don't know if visual effects are being used, but frankly, I can't see any. But it is incredible. She definitely used Isabella Gianni's inspiration from Possession and kind of took it into her own thing. But the things she's doing with her face and her mouth are frankly astounding. It is so committed and visceral, and if we lived in a perfect world, there would be some kind of nomination for her, but it's never going to happen because the Academy hates horror. But to me, she was definitely the standout by far, and I think she definitely had the most pressure on her to play this role of Ellen Hutter because it is the crucial one to the story. So if we kind of get a summary of everything I've just said, the film is impeccably directed and it looks incredible. The sets, the costumes, all of that is just out of this world. The attention to detail, the cast is fantastic, and the story is very similar with some slight deviations which I think make it a little bit better, especially, as I said, that honing in on the psychosexual element. But there is just that little 5% missing, and that's not exactly a bad thing. This is a breathtakingly well-made film which looks incredible, and it kind of did everything I wanted it to do, but I think I might have put maybe slightly too much pressure on it to exceed my expectations, but it's definitely met them. It hasn't raised the bar, it has just met it, and frankly, I'm actually really happy. If you're a fan of anything gothic or the occult or just horror in general, this is definitely one for you. For the vampire heads out there, even like the Twilight fans, go and watch this because this is essentially Twilight for freaks. I feel like this is going to be a tough one for the regular viewer to go and see, so I won't recommend it to you on that basis. If you're curious and you maybe want to dip your toes in this, fair warning, the film is quite long, and I would say there is a bit of a lull early in the second act where I was kind of just like, this has kind of lost a bit of steam, but then from then on, it is just pedal to the metal, and it just goes from there until the very end. So Nosferatu, I love it. It's not perfect, but I'm really, really glad it's here. I definitely want to see it again. There's apparently talk of the 4K Blu-ray being the extended cut of the film, which is 3 hours, and quite frankly, put it in my veins. And in all honesty, I can't wait to see what Robert Eggers does next. He made a statement fairly recently where he said he's finished a script based in the medieval times, just called The Night. He's got a Rasputin miniseries, so please, Robert, just keep getting your things made and I will always consume them. And now we get to the part of the review where I want to know what you think. Have you seen Nosferatu? Do you want to see it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Please let me know in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, every little bit helps. It's been a long day for me on the first day of the year, but it's been a very good day. I feel very blessed to be able to go and see these films and that these films are actually being made. I feel like today has very much reignited the fire in me to continue to do this. Obviously, film is something that I love and I do enjoy doing these reviews, but having it on top of a full-time job and general life stuff, it can be difficult. But I finished Nosferatu today and I was like, I can't wait to go home and make a review for this film because I really enjoyed that and I want to share that with people. And with that being said, do not succumb to the demon, say your prayers, and thank you for watching.